An update from the New South Wales Department of Education. So,
come on, do your best.
I'll do my very best. A few different contact details there. I'll flash those up at the end. This sector graph overview display is not proportional to the amount of time that I'll spend talking about each of those. So if anyone wants a mathematical activity to engage in this afternoon to keep you occupied, you might like to draw a more proportional sector graph. I'm going to look at some communications, curriculum, literacy and numeracy, and assessment. So, although I'm speaking on behalf of the department, I believe that what I'll have to say today mostly will be helpful and useful and informative to everybody here. This is one of the examples where that's not the case, because School Biz is a communication that goes out to all department staff. So I'm beginning by just letting you know there are some ways to stay informed, and I really, really encourage you as you enter teaching, or if you are already engaged in a teaching position, to make sure that you do everything you can to know what's happening in mathematics education. So School Biz goes out every Friday to department staff. The Mathematics e-News is the department newsletter for K-12, and it's emailed out about once a term, and that might improve and increase in the future, but at this stage it's once a term. And you can access that by accessing the department website, or you can join the mailing list. Now, before I proceed, I'm going to just show you this document will be emailed out to everybody at the end of the day, because none of the actual web addresses are going to be in the presentation, and each of those links connects you to the resources that I'll be sharing today. So every one of you will receive that, and the department website is one of the links that is attached to that, including all of the communications at the bottom. Oops. Okay, so the important readings that I'm talking about, you can have links there to subscribe to those if you're not already on the lists. And then the third one that I really implore you all to be on the mailing list for is the NSW News mailing list, because NSW is the New South Wales authority on education, so it's really important that you stay in the loop about what they're advising and any changes that they make to our syllabus documents. Also, I'll make the distinction that the Department of Education is not NESA, so sometimes I'm directed questions that are actually for NESA and not for the department to answer. But we really try very hard to work quite closely together to make sure that teachers are supported as they're educating young minds. So the education.newsouthwales.gov.au website is sort of the landing bank for all of the things that I'm going to talk about today, all the resources that I'm going to share. And I've spent a lot of time navigating my way through this in the last 5 weeks that I've been in this role, which is not a very long time, but now I feel like I've got a handle over where to find things. So there aren't that many links actually to get to the support for mathematics teachers. You can see the little subheadings at the top there. They go to teaching and learning, curriculum, key learning areas, mathematics. It's very straightforward, even though when you start on the home page, it can seem a little bit overwhelming and it feels like you're clicking through 500 links to get to where you want to be. Okay? So I'm going to talk about a few of the resources that we have available that I think a lot of teachers don't even know exist. And the first is the diagnostic tasks for stages 3, 4 and 5. At the moment there are solutions up on the page for stages 4 and 5. Stage 2 diagnostic tasks, which is still relevant to us in some of our contexts, are currently being published at the moment, and so they'll be available soon. They're just having all of the accessibility requirements met, but that's something that you will be able to find from the department website. So I'm going to show you when you're going into the department site. Okay, when you get to the key learning areas and you click on the stage 4 and 5 options, okay, there is a link on the site here that says resources, and that's where you can go to access all of the things that I'm talking about today. Some of them connect you to sites that are off the department site, but that's the space to go to get them all, or you can be able to use the helpful links that I sent to you today. Okay, so the diagnostics link is just there, and when you open it up, it actually links you to the Numeracy Skills Framework website, but they're all there. You can download the tasks. I suggest that you go on and download the tasks and the solutions and just have them on your faculty drives in schools. And if you're a pre-service teacher, that you save them to your thumb drives so that you've got them as a resource to use. one resource, one possible resource, because they are in the form of some sort of pen and paper test. Okay, the second set of resources are the creative mathematics task, and this is not an extensive list of resources, but there are some really good ideas. And I think what's really important, a lot of questions have been asked today about where people come up with their creative ideas, and I think forums like this are so valuable because you come to the party with one or two and you leave with about 40. And if we're strategic in the way that we practice, if you embed those little mini activities into your program straight away, then you suddenly have these really full programs and it's not a stressful experience. And even if all of those activities are not exactly how you would format them personally, it's so nice to start with something as a foundation rather than having to start everything from scratch all the time. And mathematics teachers, unfortunately, are really famous for reinventing the wheel. So it's really great to tap into what is already out there. So the department site has got a number of these kinds of tasks. The little images on that screen are to remind me to tell you what some of those are. So the first activity is a collaborative task where kids are given 12 metres of string and they're given a series of different area problems to solve. So it begins with them forming particular shapes with particular requirements, looking at all the different types of rectangles, for example, that they can construct. But then in the end, they're leading to the point where they're actually working to find out what the shape is that has the maximum area that they're going to produce. The second one is a short task about graphs in the media. So students are researching and looking for different graphs in the media, whether in a newspaper or a magazine or online. And then they're answering a series of questions about that. So it's quite open-ended because they're all answering about different graphs. But then at the end, it talks to them about is the graph misleading in any way, and looking at what the deeper understanding of what the agenda of that graph was in the media. And if it's not misleading, if it's just giving the facts, how could they manipulate it to be a misleading graph? The third one is a task around developing the floor plan and pricing what it would cost to floor a particular plan. So they go online and they find a floor plan on a housing website, and then they come up with, they're given a set, it's stage 4, so they're given a set of criteria for it costs this much to carpet or this much to tile. And because the open-ended part is that they're all accessing different floor plans, so it's them accessing real life information and then working out approximate costs for those. And the fourth one is always a favourite in mathematics classrooms if you can work collaboratively with your TAS group, or if you just have a little bit of courage and you'll take an electric fry pan into the classroom, is looking at recipes and the connections to ratios and modifying recipes to serve a different number of people than what's in the original recipe, and then actually like cooking the stuff. That's nice, right? Okay. A class who eats together stays together. Okay, this is one of my favourite resources, and I thought it was lost for all time, and then I started working in this role and I discovered that it's actually still there and it's available for everyone. So on the department site, which I've just flicked out of, okay, so on the resources page there is a link directly to the Red Dragonfly'maths challenge, and I'll just link us so you can see it. This is fantastic for different lesson starters and problem solving activities. And it used to be in this neat little book that if you got really lucky, you got it for free when you went to different conferences like this one. But now you can just access all of them online, flick it up at the start of a lesson and get the kids to dive into some problem solving. Or if you are a school that wants to foster that kind of problem solving skill all the time, you can do it as like a problem of the week or something like that. Fantastic resource and really good as a little lesson filler if you've got that extra 5 or 10 minutes to spare. Does anyone ever have 5 or 10 minutes to spare? This is one of my favourite activities from that actually, and I used it when I was doing a unit on computation with integers and looking at order of operations, because some of those problems that you have to write have to use order of operation to be able to be used. You don't need to photograph it because it's all on that website, okay? The final resource I'll just speak to is the Teaching Measurement Stage 4 resource, which has heaps of creative ideas for lessons in length, area, volume, time, and Pythagoras' theorem. So if you're thinking about trying to embed 1 or 2 creative lessons in a unit, you've got a book of them all ready to go, and it's got a really nice graphic on the front. That's what it looks like. So I would encourage you can access all of that from the department site, and that goes for anyone who doesn't work in the public sector as well. It's free to all. Okay, so this is about maximising the educational outcomes for all students. They're free for everybody. One of the other resources that's available that people may or may not be aware of, there was a project last year that was launched by the department called the MESH project. And MESH stands for Mathematics, English, Science and History. And all of those KLAs had new syllabuses for stage 6. Mathematics only launched the new syllabus this year for Mathematics Standard, as you would all be aware. So that project brought together teams of teachers who were working with other colleagues from other schools, and they sat and wrote units of work, and they built up different types of assessment tasks to support the implementation of that new syllabus. All of those resources are also available on the department site, and I am going to flick back to the page again, because on the stage 6 page, it's not under resources, it's under programming. Okay, and when you scroll down, you'll see some sample scopes and sequences, and then you scroll further down, and then there's the list of the Mathematics Standard. There's a set of resources separate for the Mathematics Standard Rhombus course, okay, which means looking at those outcome points that have the little rhombus next to it, so perhaps students who are pursuing a Standard 1 pathway, and that's for Year 11 and 12. Okay, so there are some minimal resources there for Mathematics and Mathematics Extension 1, but I think when the new syllabus is implemented, those will be overhauled. So at the moment, I would use that to look at the different resources that are available there for the standard courses, because there are some fantastic ideas there. And once again, if you're scratching at ideas for how to implement the investigative style tasks, then that's a really great place to go. And even if you've already got your particular task in your school that you're going to use for Year 11 Standard this year, I would suggest that you could use any one of those tasks as a learning activity in your classroom as well. So I really encourage you to go and have a search of that site. So a similar project is running at the moment, or is about to run, for the calculus-based courses and supporting the implementation of those. And there's actually an EOI out in School Biz at the moment, because it is specifically for department teachers to become a project leader. So I would encourage you to have a look at your most recent, actually the last edition, because this edition was launched today because it's Friday. So the last edition of School Biz has got the EOI link to that project if you're interested. I will talk very briefly about literacy and numeracy and the department's literacy and numeracy strategy. So it was launched and announced by the Minister in 2016, and it's been launched in 2017. And you can read those notes for yourself, that it's been informed by the best available evidence. But I think what I want to say is, from a departmental point of view, we are focusing our attention on the syllabus and good pedagogy over new programs, okay? That all the tools and initiatives are about improving literacy and numeracy within the curriculum. So the syllabus is what we are using to make sure that we're building those general capabilities around, accessing the syllabus and accessing the learning from the context in which the syllabus was written. So there are a couple of new tools that are rolling out to schools. Plan 2 is the software that is going to be used to assess students on their literacy and numeracy capabilities. There is a program called Best Start that currently operates in kindergarten, and then it will map where everybody is on the literacy and numeracy progressions. Now, that might be foreign language to many of you, I'm not sure. So currently, New South Wales uses the Numeracy Continuum. I'm getting a few nods, okay? The Numeracy Continuum as a document is being phased out, and the national literacy and numeracy progressions are being phased in. And I think what's really important in me saying all of that is just that it's syllabus first, and we're looking at how to support the learning of literacy and numeracy skills within the context of our syllabuses. Okay, so as an addition to the the Best Start that runs in kindergarten. They are implementing a Best Start Year 7. I'm not sure if that's what it will be called, but that's the equivalent idea. And it's looking at a new online assessment to see where the students are sitting in relation to those progressions once they enter into high school. And it's really neat because they do the online assessment and the data is available 48 hours after they've sat the test. So that really can inform your class structures, looking at what the needs of the students are when they enter into Year 7 and supporting early intervention for students who require it in their literacy and numeracy skills, which is particularly important given that New South Wales has some minimum standards in being able to reach an HSC now. So these are the symbols that you will see in the coming times. Everything that the department is going to release will be connected through the syllabus. If you are from a school who is looking at mapping the literacy and numeracy progressions to the syllabus, just be aware that NESA and the department are already doing that, and that will be made available on the online version of the syllabus document. So in each topic of maths, there'll be some sort of reference, where there's the background knowledge and all of that sort of information. There'll be a reference to the Numeracy Continuum. I've said the wrong one now. There'll be a reference to the numeracy progressions on there and which specific parts are related to that topic of the syllabus. Now, the next part, and I just will do a quick time check, is the part that I'm most interested in talking about today because, as is implied by my current title, part of my role is to advise. And because there's an A in front, at the moment I'm just acting like I know how to advise. So many schools have been implementing alternative tasks over the last 5 to 10 years. In some schools, they're only really considering it now because it's been made mandatory in stage 6. So people are really only engaging with those sorts of tasks for the first time. And I think I always leave inspired by this conference, and I come away with all of these ideas about how students can really demonstrate their learning and their understanding. And I've chosen this image to segue into the discussion about assessment because anytime I do one of those tasks in a maths lesson, hands shoot straight up in the air, and it's not because they're ready to get into the task, it's because they ask the same question. But miss, does this count? And I answer, as every great practitioner does, yeah, of course it counts. Everything counts. But I think that sometimes mathematics teachers are asking the same sort of question, and so their response to the child is less and less convincing. Oh, yes, definitely. Like, of course it counts. But deep down inside, they're like, I don't know if it counts. It's not part of the formal assessment schedule. There's no weighting attached to it. So does it really count? And when I think about all of the activities that everyone's talked about today, I think about the learning that I would observe in my students from those activities, and I wonder, well, am I just going to completely disregard all of that when I come to assigning a grade? And so if I'm not, where do I go? Like, where do I start? And I think that what I'm about to suggest will answer the question that was asked earlier about, well, how do we logistically do that? So I'm not trying to be controversial in the things that I say today, okay? I'm just going to offer a sensible alternative method of assessment. And I liked what Tim said about how everything is accessible, because if that's the model, then that's brilliant. And I think that there is scope for that in all of the courses up until the end of Year 11, because then in Year 12 we have to produce an assessment schedule that has weightings attached to it. And unfortunately that's functioning under the current system. But up until that point, everything that we submit to NESA is a grade. And so what I'm hoping to do is to challenge how we might do that more authentically in the classroom. And so I'm going to start by saying that the the requirements from NESA are reporting against the Common Grade Scale, and that's also referred to as the General Course Performance Descriptors. And hopefully that's not foreign language to anybody in this room. Okay, this is not on the screen for you to read through it. Okay, it's just there to show you what they are. They're General Course Performance Descriptors, and they are taken from this lovely looking site. I don't know who chose the colour option for the Assessment Resource Centre, but this is where those grades were taken from and the descriptions of those grades. It's called the Assessment Resource Centre, and it's, despite the appearance, it's actually a very, very useful site. They're General Course Performance Descriptors. In mathematics, I'm not sure who was responsible, but they decided to break down all of the grades into two separate grades.
Who did that?
I'm not having a go. I'm just saying that already we're different from everybody else. So the question becomes, after the general performance descriptors, well, what does that look like in a mathematical context? And so on the Assessment Resource Centre, scroll. There is a page specifically for mathematics, and it goes through what a student can typically do at each of those levels. Okay, so there's grade A10, grade A9, all the way through to grade E2. And so I want to draw your attention to that, because these are the descriptors by which we assess our students. It's not based on a mark, it's based on what the student can demonstrate in each of the topic areas. And these are topic descriptions, so I think that it's fair to say that we can assess them according to the topic. And then a lot of people will often ask, well, how do we factor in the working mathematically components? Well, that's at the centre, as has already been described today, and students who are functioning at those higher levels are working mathematically. There's no way that we could assess somebody as having an extensive understanding unless they were working mathematically in each of those topics. Okay, so there is a website that has this list of what a student can typically do at each of those levels in stage 5. So because we are mathematicians, and I'm going to go back into the, I don't want to minimise everything. Here it is. A group of head teachers from Southwestern Sydney. Once again, there's no way to show you this in a meaningful way because you can't digest anything that's written on that board right now, okay? But we've tabulated what those descriptions are for each topic. So there are a number of different head teachers involved, and they went back and consulted with their faculties, and then we came back and we put all of the bold outcomes on this sheet are straight from that NESA description, okay? And then there was professional dialogue and arguing about what needed to go into the gaps, because there were gaps. It wasn't an extensive list. There were gaps in each of the topics. And so those are written in the italics. So this is not an official document. It is just a document that has been produced by a number of teachers with lots of different years of experience to suggest that perhaps maybe this is logistically how we can make sure that we're using everything to assess our students and not just a pen and paper test at the end of a unit. And so because that was such a powerful tool for our teachers in the network that produced this, it's been shared with a lot of different people. Every workshop I've ever run, I've shared it with the people who have been there, and I'm very, very happy to share it with you all as well, if you feel that that would be useful. This is for the stage 5 outcomes, but then they went away and collaborated to come up with what we believed were showing extensive, high, sound, basic and limited understandings at a stage 4 level. And I believe that the future is to try and look at that for our stage 6 courses as well. And so I think this informs what we're looking for if students are performing at particular levels. So I can't go into very much detail about those in the time that I have. I don't think I have very much time, so I'm on my last 2 slides. I would really love for us as a group of practitioners to shift away from telling somebody that they've scored an A, B, C, D or E to using the language around what those grades describe, because those come with particular connotations from everybody's history, everyone's experience, where a D and an E is a fail. But D and E in our context means that you have shown a basic or a limited understanding of the course outcomes. And the reality is that a lot of adults have a basic or limited understanding of mathematics. So I think that we need to really shift from referring to the grades to describing the understanding. And if I had my way, then reports wouldn't have A, B, C, D, E next to the outcomes that are reported against. It would have those words, okay? But I just think that's a really good way of shifting the mindset about grading and assessment, is shifting the way that we talk about it. And some final thoughts that, firstly, a grade is not a mark, and I can use two simple examples. One is that if you are if you're following a 5.1 pathway, which is part of the stage 5 course, and you score 100%, but the assessment task only assesses up until a sound understanding by those course performance descriptors, then 100% does not an A make, right? It's a C. Okay, so it's really important that we start to shift how we're talking about reporting on how students perform in assessment tasks, whether it's a percentage, a mark. I think the written feedback is a fantastic way to go. And I think that really the only reference to the grade should be done at the end when we're reporting on those grades. And I had a second example, but it's gone out of my head. So when you're writing the assessment task, and I think we've talked about that the pen and paper test is not the actual enemy, because we can write them really well. I think if you begin when you're writing any assessment task with the course performance descriptors in mind, okay, you can be fairer in the way that you're constructing the test. You can make sure that you're assessing at every level, from a limited to an extensive understanding. You have the scope to be able to, in your context, if you know that you're working with a lot of students who are high achievers, then you don't need to necessarily assess them on those outcomes that are at a limited or a basic understanding. They can enter in at a different point, they can exit at a different point. And then again, there's totally room and heaps of freedom to be able to allow students to go with those grading sheets and say, well, I showed a sound level of understanding. What do I need to do to show a high level of understanding? Suddenly, they've got this powerful document to inform them of where their learning should go to next. So it's not just tested once at the end of a unit and then never considered ever again with no chance for improvement. And then the final one I'll just comment on is that when you're recording test results or any assessment results, I think it's really important to break those tests, if it's testing multiple topics, when you're recording them, break them up into the topics themselves rather than recording the overall mark. Because if you have a test that's out of 45 and 30 marks are from algebra and 15 marks are from Pythagoras' theorem, a student who gets 36, what does that tell me about their understanding? Well, it doesn't really tell me anything unless I know where those marks came from. So I think I would really encourage you to think about the ways that you're recording those results, so that you're then using those to inform your grades per topic, and then at the end you're in a position to be able to average out those grades and work out where your students are performing. So I'm very happy to share those. Please, I must say again, they're not an official document, but they're a fantastic way to build conversation around how we are assessing in mathematics and giving us the freedom to really truly understand where our students are functioning in terms of their working mathematically outcomes, which is what we've been trying to talk about achieving today. So thank you for your time.